Hi, I'm Eric Bolling. Thanks for watching us tonight. Bill O'Reilly is on assignment. He'll be back on Monday reporting from Los Angeles. Now let's get straight to our top story. Media cluelessness about President Trump. It was on full display during President Trump's first joint news conference earlier today.
Mr. President, you've said before that torture works. You've praised Russia. You've said you want to ban some Muslims from coming to America. You've suggested there should be punishment for abortion. For many people in Britain, those sound like alarming beliefs. What do you say to our viewers at home who are worried about some of your views and worried about you becoming the leader of the free world?
You said you'd help us with a Brexit trade deal. You said you'd stand by us with NATO. But how can the British Prime Minister believe you? Because you have been known in the past to change your position on things.
Now, do you need any more evidence that the media is still totally out of touch with what President Trump is trying to do? Joining us now with reaction from the White House, Kellyanne Conway, senior advisor to President Trump. Kellyanne, start with that. The media, the left, people just don't get Donald Trump. What's taking them so long to embrace this guy?
Very few people really in the media have made the adjustment from primary candidate Trump to nominee Trump to President-elect Trump to now President Trump. All the stories sound the same to many of us, where, as that BBC reporter today did, they just rehash their list of grievances and pretend it's in the form of a question. And I'm very happy that President Trump did not answer every piece of her question, because it was inappropriate to ask that at a time when Prime Minister May was standing right next to him and they were talking about NATO. They were talking about bilateral trade agreements. Prime Minister May, her Prime Minister, had just talked about what a special relationship the UK and the US have, and that both President Trump and Prime Minister May are bent on making sure that that special relationship is reflected in their respective administrations. They both came into office in very similar ways. You had Brexit in the UK, and you, of course, had this unbelievable and stunning election result here in the US. I think people didn't see it coming. You know, all we ever hear, Eric, is that this country is so divided, we're so divided. Then why in the world did not enough people, and those who are in charge of informing the public, actually entertain the possibility that in the so-called divided country, the other one of the two candidates might just win? Doesn't that make mathematical sense? And so whether it's the Twitter feeds with the snark, the eye rolling, the congenitally negative descriptors that are used towards the president, and really just the kinds of questions that are shouted out of the press conference, look, I'm a very open press person, that's obvious. I believe in a fair and free press, and with that comes responsibility. We believe in being challenged on the issues and otherwise. But there's a big difference between that and just believing that the job is to play gotcha and to always find something negative. I would just say one thing. He has gone at such a big pace this week. It's been action and impact all week long by President Trump, action and impact, that people are starting to get spoiled. They'll ask, well, when is he going to do this? Why didn't he do that? Where is this? Where is that? In a White House that is known for, you know, not such a more lethargic, I think, molasses-like pace in some of these executive orders.
That brings up the question, can he keep this pace up?
Yes, he will, because there's so much more to do, as you know. Many of these were things that he promised, plans that he laid out in the campaign, and people seem shocked that he's actually following through on them. I don't think Washington is accustomed to somebody who's just been a brilliant businessman, who's accustomed to delivering and producing results, who's accountable to, in this case, the people. And the other thing, I think, the point that Steve Bannon and others have made, it's a point I made to Anderson Cooper a couple weeks ago, it's a point I made to Chuck Todd last Sunday, but it doesn't get covered, just two words get covered, which tells you something else about bias. It's the point I keep making, which is, it's time to learn the American people the way Donald Trump knows them. He obviously knew something about the American people that many in the media missed. You know, you want to see facts, I'll show you headline after headline, story after story. Hillary Clinton will win. She will take the House and Senate with her. She will win 350 electoral votes. It will be historic. She doesn't even say Donald Trump's name anymore because it's a joke. And, you know, there we were going into states based on our own data. It wasn't a big mystery. Going into states with our two greatest assets, Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and having them visit those states to make a difference and eventually win them. But why don't we at least admit that if you didn't understand America, go out there and talk to America. Stop talking to yourselves and go and learn from the country.
Right.
What motivated them and what they expect from this administration. I've been a pollster for 28 years. That's what we do for a living. We get out of the major cities. We go out into and talk to people. It's a huge benefit.
You did what Hillary Clinton didn't do and ended up winning the election. Kellyanne,
let me just say something about that, too. I mean, I think also it's always the it's always what I call the presumptive negativity. And if you go back to the campaign, you're about to make the point, Eric, that Hillary Clinton said, turn Texas blue. Her team said, we're going after Georgia and Arizona. So everybody followed the story, chased the story. No evidence of that at all. And it turns out Hillary Clinton spent more money in Georgia, Arizona than she did in Michigan and Wisconsin. We didn't make that mistake. We didn't give in to the constant mockery and insults. We were impervious to our naysayers and critics and won. And I think that's just the point people are making in moving forward. If we've moved forward, if we've looked past a lot, if we always have our cheeks turned, then it's high time those who have punched us in the gut again and again try to do the same.
All right, Kellyanne, I point out the dizzying pace. On last Friday, Obamacare repeal. Monday, TPP withdrew, freezing on federal hiring. Wednesday, the border wall. Today, you signed some executive orders on immigration. Tell us about, first of all, we'll get to what they entail, but listen to what Governor Malloy had to say about what you guys are up to. Listen.
We should not be discriminating against refugees based on what the religion is. It's against our Constitution. It's against the fabric of who we are and what we are. And quite frankly, if you look at the criminal history of refugees, it's a lot less than the criminal history of people born in this country.
Now, Kellyanne, I have the executive order in my hand. I read through this. I don't see you guys pointing out anyone by religion. It looks like by origin, national origin, right?
Well, it's actually extreme vetting based on a country's history of exporting and training and harboring terrorists. The president said very clearly today at the Pentagon, I was right there, he said this executive order is meant to protect our nation from terrorists. I don't know who can disagree with that in premise. And in effect, it means those countries that had this history. And he also said, he signed 2 executive orders today after he oversaw the swearing in of our 26th Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, who will be Secretary of Defense. The president signed 2 executive orders. One was to enhance and expand the military, give our brave men and women in uniform the tools they need so that there is no doubt around this globe that we are the most prepared, toughest force and defense in the world, but we're also people who pursue peace. We want peace first, but we are ready to defend our country, our people, our interests, and our allies here and abroad. Secondly, the extreme vetting, where he says we're going to stop radical Islamic terrorists. In fact, we're going to eradicate them from the earth. This is actually novel for a commander-in-chief and a president of the United States and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, none of whom were willing to say radical Islamic terrorism. Basically, the proverbial eye roll with, well, what good would it do to name them? It does a heck of a lot of good to name them because Americans are tired of watching the bloodletting in Brussels, in Paris, in Nice, certainly, and then, of course, here at home on our own soil. And so it's very difficult to argue with a president who, at the end of week 1, is capping off an incredible week of action impact by saying to Americans, I want to protect us from radical Islamic terrorism. And it's very narrowly prescribed. It will be very narrowly prescribed according to those that fit the criteria I just laid out.
One of the sections of this executive order, you talk about supporting U.S. Constitution over religious edicts. I thought that was very interesting. Kellyanne, before we go to break, I want to talk about this a little bit. There was an hour conversation with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto today. And I know President Trump was asked about this with Theresa May earlier, but he said he didn't want to talk about the pay for us, but who's going to pay for the wall? When will we know the specifics of a pay for the border wall?
Well, we'll know when it's been decided, but those things need to be negotiated. They need to be, the consequences need to be weighed. And this is one thing I'll say about all of the action statements and executive orders from this week, including that hour-long conversation this morning. Nothing that President Trump does is ceremonial. It's all consequential. That's what I mean by action and impact, and that includes the phone call. We don't have those solutions right now. I think it would be irresponsible to have those solutions in stone right now because it's a very complicated process.
Is he open to it, though, Kellyanne? Is he at least open to it, to work with President Trump on how Mexico is going to pay?
Well, I don't speak for the Mexican president, but the American president is open to a number of different solutions, a number of different options when it comes to paying for that wall. But look, think about what the wall really is. It represents, and it is indeed, a physical wall on the southern border, maybe 2,000 miles long. And what it is we're trying to take corrective action of years, if not decades, of just looking the other way, of people and drugs pouring over the border, of us being a sovereign nation without borders that are the physical barriers of sovereignty. We spend billions of dollars protecting other nations' borders, and yet not our own. So when you're talking about that type of corrective action, and frankly, Eric, you're talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars we spend, or probably more, on accommodating illegal immigration, you're talking about a very modest sum of money, relatively speaking, when it comes to our safety and security. Plus, there's a $60 billion trade deficit with Mexico.
Right.
And the Mexican president knows that. He knows that the #1 source of revenue going into Mexico is money coming from Mexicans being in America and sending it back to their home country. And he's got a lot on the line here. And I don't think the peso did very well after
the peso
he said
actually
he canceled the meeting.
has had a really rough go since he canceled the meeting.
And look at the Dow Jones in comparison. It turns out markets like action and impact by their presidents.
We want to hold you over, but will Peña Nieto come back to that meeting that he canceled before? Will he be here with us next week?
I'm not sure, but I'm glad they had a full hour-long conversation this morning on the phone. I think that was a very helpful step forward.
All right, stay right there. We've got much more with you on the other side of this break on how the administration has handled its first full week, and later, the media largely ignored tens of thousands of people marching for life in Washington today. We'll take a hard look at that. Stay tuned. In the Impact segment tonight, we continue now with Kellyanne Conway, Senior Advisor to President Trump. Now, Kellyanne, been a very, very busy first. It's only a week, 1 week for the administration. What are you happy with so far, and what are you looking to improve on going forward?
I'm happy and I'm proud that we elected a president in Donald Trump who actually made good on his promises and the plans that he put forward to the American people, even when they weren't fairly or fully covered. The 10-point plan to reform the Veterans Administration, for example, the 4 or 5-point plan to defeat radical Islamic terrorism, the infrastructure idea, the repealing and replacing Obamacare, all of his ideas were made public. He would say them in speeches routinely, and then we would publish them on the website or tweet out links to them. And so I think that was so incredibly important to many Americans in this election and now in this execution as President, Eric, because their major complaint about Washington and typical politicians is that they change their mind, they break their promises, Washington really transforms them into something unrecognizable and unseemly, and most importantly that these elected officials are not transparent enough. So everything that President Trump has done this week has been very public and open and transparent, whether it's tomorrow he's going to have calls with the heads of 3 different countries. He, of course, hosted Prime Minister May here today. He made 2 visits to 2 different agencies and departments. He's made 17 or 18 statements.
Right.
So it's been, I think for a press who wants to be informed, it's been a very transparent week of, I know it's been a busy week and we appreciate everybody working overtime in that way, but I'm very proud of the impact. I think that the White House should not be about prestige for the people who work here. I think it should be about impact, and it has been.
And what could he have done better this week?
What could he have done better this week?
Well, the whole
My
group.
goodness.
The whole group, yeah.
All of us?
Everyone can improve. I mean, you look back at a football game. I look back at a show that we tape. I go, you know, I could have read that read better. Or I could ask this question. What could you guys have done better?
No doubt. Perhaps pushed back on, perhaps not been so presumptuous that what we were doing would be covered fairly and openly, and that people wouldn't glom onto 1 word or 2 words or something he has said or not said and missing the entire story. I mean, there are so many great stories here. I think the personal impact of why we're doing so many things that we're doing, of talking to those laborers the other day who have never even been near the White House, let alone invited in to talk to a president on day 2 or 3 of his administration, invited to the Oval Office to tell him what their experience and their aspirations and their fears and their hopes are for them and their families. I thought that was quite unprecedented. Well, they thought it was quite unprecedented. And so I think really maybe to get some more of the human impact stories out there and not leave to chance that that most of what we're doing will be covered openly. Hope springs eternal.
So can I just ask you this?
Yes.
And I looked back over the weekend and you had some great initiatives. I talked about Obamacare, your trade deals, breaking the trade deal, the TPP, the safety, the security, the immigration stuff. And then there were some of these other things that I felt like it was taking away from your message, you know, the voter fraud stuff. I mean, is this something he really feels that strongly about?
The president has said he does feel strongly about that, but this is really about registration and rolls. This is who is registered to vote, and if you're registered to vote, perhaps you can vote. We know that there are people who are registered in multiple states. We know that there are people who are registered and who are dead. We know there are people who are registered who are illegal and therefore not qualified to be registered. And he is, I give him credit in terms of his willingness to have an investigation. Many people just talk and talk and talk. That's really the hallmark of Washington, D.C. Talk and talk, no action. He talked, and then he put action right behind it. And he's doing it at a time when there's no election on the horizon for him or anyone else. If this were close to the midterm elections, if this certainly were close to a presidential election, then maybe somebody would cry foul. But this is just the president saying that one person, one vote, bedrock of our democracy, should be adhered to. And Eric, I guess I wonder, what is everybody so afraid to learn? I mean, this is the investigation that everybody is disagreeing with. This is we've had presidents take actions that maybe didn't strike a lot of Americans as very common sense, but they took them anyway. And so this man wants to call for an investigation of our process, of our registration rolls. And I just don't know what everybody is afraid of. Are they afraid eventually that the dead people are going to have to show an ID before the dead people vote?
For me, it's not even that it's that bad of an idea. It's just it seems to be taking away from, these initiatives that are big. These are big policy initiatives. It felt like it was a little bit of a distraction. Kellyanne, I'm going to have to leave it there. By the way, this is week 1, 208 or 416 more weeks, depending on how you look at things left to go.
Come and see us.
Thank you so much. Next on the rundown, tens of thousands march for life in Washington today, but are overlooked by much of the media. Newt Gingrich joins us to opine moments away. In the personal story segment tonight, today's March for Life rally in Washington, the annual event drawing tens of thousands of pro-life activists to the nation's capital, with Vice President Mike Pence delivering a passionate speech to the big crowd.
Life is winning in America because of all of you. So I urge you to press on. But as it is written, let your gentleness be evident to all. Let this movement be known for love, not anger.
Despite the march's big turnout, the mainstream media appearing to do its best to downplay it today, especially compared to the nonstop coverage given to last weekend's pro-abortion march. Joining us now to analyze from Arlington, Virginia, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Newt, you look at the coverage. You look at the coverage. It's nonstop. It was wall-to-wall last week for the pro-abortion march. Yet you hardly heard very much about this one, even though Vice President Pence made an appearance.
Well, but this is pretty natural. I think, Callista was singing at the Basilica last night in the Mass for Life. And when they announced that Vice President Pence was going to be there, there was 90 seconds of unbroken applause. I think all across America, people of faith, people who care for life, people who are concerned about stopping abortion are thrilled that the Vice President of the United States, for the first time ever, came to the march. And let's be honest, this is exactly what Steve Bannon was saying to the New York Times. Left-wing, pro-abortion, anti-conservative news media are going to do everything they can to hide from the reality that there are vastly more Americans who care about life than there are who care about weird people wearing strange hats with kitty cat ears and talking about bombing the White House. I mean, the grotesque difference between the hard left that we saw on Saturday and the Americans who came together today, the difference in attitude, the difference in tone, the difference in language. I think a lot more Americans are comfortable with Vice President Pence's speech than with Madonna's speech.
Mm-hmm. And also the difference in the media coverage as well.
Well, look, the media is 80% or 90% of the media is the opposition party. I mean, let's be honest about it. These aren't reporters. These are propagandists. There was one panel on journalism in the age of Trump in which I don't think a single member of the panel voted for Trump. They've learned nothing. They were wrong during the primaries. He won. They were wrong in the general election. He won. They've been wrong about his cabinet. It's a great cabinet. They were wrong about covering the inaugural, which is truly an historic inaugural, hearkening back to Lincoln's first inaugural in 1861. They miss it every time because they're so far to the left and so out of touch with everyday Americans.
Mr. Speaker, let's take a listen to the President sat down with David Muir. Listen to this a little bit on what was going on here. Take a listen.
You're going to have a lot of people coming on Friday. And I will say this, and I didn't realize this, but I was told, you will have a very large crowd of people. I don't know, as large or larger. Some people say it's going to be larger. Pro-life people. And they say the press doesn't cover them.
I don't want to compare crowd sizes again.
No, you shouldn't. But let me just say, what they do say is that the press doesn't cover them.
So in that shot, the president telling David Muir that there is a media bias. He recognizes the media bias.
Right. And I think every American should recognize the media bias. You're not getting any kind of serious news coverage. You're getting propaganda. You're getting hostility. I mean, I looked at an exchange last weekend with Kellyanne Conway where the interviewer was just plain hostile, represented essentially the left-wing worldview, and got totally argumentative. They weren't being an interviewer. They were being an attacker. And I say this, I've had a long career in this business. The news media has gotten worse, just as the academic community has gotten worse. They are more left-wing, they are more monolithic, and they are more angry year by year.
Mr. Speaker, you have a piece up on FoxNews.com. The title is "The Left Should Be Scared to Death at Trump's First Week." What do you mean?
Well, this has been an extraordinary first week. You look at the whole series of executive orders President Trump has signed. You look at the steps he has started to take. He's actually doing what he campaigned on. And nothing could be worse if you're a left-winger than to have President Trump actually behave like candidate Trump. And I think the list of executive orders tells you more is coming. It's coming fast. His declaration he wants to eliminate 75% of the regulations in Washington. That just every left-wing person in the country who's been desperately trying to use government to coerce us into change has to be shaking in their boots. It's been a great week for conservatism, a great week for America, and a really bad week for the left.
All right, let me ask you this before we go. You have about a minute or so, sir. Your wife, Callista, has she been named ambassador to the Vatican?
No, she has not. They're going through a long process. There are a number of very fine people who are apparently on a list. I know a number of them personally. Callista knows them. We respect every one of them. I think she's honored to be considered, and I think certainly she would be honored to serve. But nobody should be confused. No one has been picked at this point, but people did talk about her, and it did get out, and I didn't lie about it. I said, yes, she's under consideration. But that's the key term, under consideration.
Well, here, let me ask you this then. Are you brushing up on your Italian?
I can order pasta. I can survive. But I'm also going to, I'll be on Fox News regularly. Nobody on the left should hope that I'm somehow going to disappear for 3 or 4 years, happily eating pasta in Rome.
Well,
I'll be around often enough that you and I will have fun.
I'm sure there's a studio somewhere in the Vatican that we can get Newt Gingrich and Callista up in front of it. Newt, thank you very much, sir. Directly ahead, Miami-Dade, Florida says it's ditching its sanctuary status after President Trump's executive order. Will more cities be right behind it? Back in a moment. In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, sanctuary cities after President Trump signed an executive order this week threatening to defund the sanctuary cities. The mayor of Miami-Dade says his jails will now comply with all federal detainer requests. Now, before, the county would only hold illegal immigrants indefinitely if the feds first agreed to reimburse its costs. It's an early victory for President Trump, but will more sanctuary cities follow suit? Joining us now with reaction from Chicago, Steve Cortez, a Fox News contributor and a former advisor to the Trump campaign, and from San Diego, Enrique Morones, founder and director of Border Angels, an immigration advocacy group. Enrique, let's start with you. The mayor of Miami-Dade said, you know what, I'm going to abide by federal law, and he's no longer going to be a sanctuary status for illegals caught there. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, they're undocumented people. As you know, we don't call them illegals. These are human beings, and sanctuary cities have been around since biblical times, trying to help the people that are being persecuted, people that are, the Jewish times, the Nazis, etc. So there's always been an underground railroad, a way to help the people that need some sort of sanctuary. And the fact that most major cities that have sanctuary cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, are planning to continue to have the sanctuary city status.
Enrique, I understand that, but weigh in on what Miami, the initiative Miami has taken.
Yeah, that's one person. The majority aren't doing that. And the fact that the mayor of Miami wants to do it, Miami-Dade, that's his prerogative. We'll see what happens. We don't know exactly what the federal funding that's going to be withheld is, because like a lot of things that Donald Trump says, it's not very clear. He hasn't thought it through. He's a person that's been inconsistent with his messages, and the fact that he wants to do away with the sanctuary cities by withholding federal funding. What does that mean? Is he going to do away with the fire department funding, the police funding?
Well, there are many forms of funding that the feds can withhold to a municipality, a state, or a city. Steve Cortez, as Enrique points out that Donald Trump's been inconsistent. Has he, in fact, been inconsistent?
No, he's been remarkably consistent, and I will tell you this, as a Latino and as the son of an immigrant, I do say illegal immigrant. They're not undocumented. That makes it sound like there's some paperwork that's out of order. If you break into my home at night, you're not an undocumented visitor, you're a thief, you're a burglar. So I think that it matters the terms we use. We have to speak in plain English, and we have to be honest about the situation. When it comes to sanctuary cities, by the way, the people who suffer the most, ironically, are Latinos, because largely these people who are hiding in plain sight, these criminals who are hiding in plain sight, are terrorizing Latino communities. So President Trump, thank goodness, is going to bring sanity back to this country. We know that there are people who are not supposed to be here in the first place, and then on top of that are committing crimes and are dangerous to this country. They need to be gone yesterday.
And Enrique, so you're the mayor, let's say, role play here a little bit. You're the mayor of San Diego, where you're coming from right now. Your city needs money. Your city needs money for cops, for border security. And the feds say, hey, listen, either you start turning over illegals, or guess what, we're going to hold back some of that money. You're going to say, no, thank you, we're going to stay broke.
Once again, these are undocumented people. The words in the past, 3/5 of a human being, WAPs. This terminology later changed. The same thing's going to happen here. In San Diego, we have a sanctuary city and national city because they know that reaching out and working with the Latino community or the undocumented community, of which a lot is not Latino, is good for the city. You want to have that cooperation between law enforcement and the community, whether they're documented or not. This is something that we've seen across the country and all over the world. And Donald Trump has been very inconsistent. So taking his word is not something that's consistent. He's consistently inconsistent. So the sanctuary city is one of these many things that's going to be debated. As you know, President
Enrique, you've been on this show before. I think there's been consistency from the Trump administration. There's been certainly consistency from this seat right here. Mr. Bill O'Reilly is vehemently against any sanctuary cities. Steve, let's go to you on this. New York gets around $700 million in federal funding that could be, emphasis, earmarked under this sanctuary city policy. This is per Reuters. I just make this number up out of my head. It's per Reuters. $700 million in New York, $400 million in L.A., 40 or 50 million in San Francisco. Will these mayors start to turn and say, you know what, maybe I need those funds. I will no longer be sanctuary?
Eric, I think they're going to have to, and particularly my hometown, where I am right now, Chicago. This city is broke, largely due to terrible blue state policies, and we cannot afford at all, as a city, to forego federal funds for some sort of a liberal. And by the way, let's talk about sanctuary. I even hate the term sanctuary city. Sanctuary for whom? It's not sanctuary for the victims of crimes. It certainly wasn't sanctuary for Kate Steinle, who was murdered in cold blood in San Francisco because the San Francisco police released a known, dangerous, illegal criminal out onto the streets instead of to the deportation force of ICE, as was requested and is required by federal law. They released him out of the streets, and less than 3 months later, he killed her in cold blood for no reason. A beautiful, young, innocent American who is the victim of liberal politics. We simply can't have any more of that, and we certainly can't afford it either. You're right.
And the debate will continue. The debate has certainly heated up. Enrique, Steve, thank you so much. Directly ahead, President Trump already shaking things up in a big way with America's allies. What will be the fallout on the world stage? We'll be right back with that.
The O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Eric Bolling in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Factor follow-up segment tonight, how President Trump plans to deal with America's allies. Today, President Trump met with British Prime Minister Theresa May, holding his first joint news conference, both leaders embracing continuing close ties between the U.S. and Britain. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley, the new U.S. ambassador to the UN, is making clear America's foreign policy is now a whole new ballgame under President Trump.
Our goal with the administration is to show value at the UN, and the way that we'll show value is to show our strength, show our voice, have the backs of our allies, and make sure that our allies have our back as well. For those that don't have our back, we're taking names.
Joining us now to analyze from Washington, the Heritage Foundation's Niall Gardner, along with Jillian Turner, former staffer on the National Security Council. Jillian, you heard that from Nikki Haley. Wow, a different tone versus what we've heard in the past. She equates value with strength, and she said, if you're not on board, we're taking names.
Yeah, she's totally different. But, you know, also what's notable there is she said that part of how we sort of show our value at the UN is by having our allies back. And that's key to countries all around the world that are sort of watching this new administration with bated breath and thinking or wondering or fearing that, you know, America first means that we leave our allies behind. So I think it was really important that she included that turn of phrase in there also.
And Niall, it feels like our new foreign policy edict is, you know, everything's on the table.
Well, I think certainly it's been a very good start so far. And I have to say, Nikki Haley's comments earlier were absolutely terrific. What a superb choice as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, advancing American interests on the world stage. And I think it's been a great day today with the visit of the British Prime Minister advancing the special relationship. And America has no stronger ally on the world stage than Great Britain. And I think the new presidency is sending a very clear message that America stands with its allies. And that's a big difference, I think, from the Obama administration. After all, President Obama really threw many U.S. allies under the bus, including Israel and Great Britain. And I think you do have a different mindset in the White House now, which is very refreshing.
And refreshing now, I'll stay with you on this. So it struck me, I watched the two world leaders right there. I saw Prime Minister May, I saw President Trump stand there. Both won on a very, let's call it nationalistic platform. Brexit, and she won, and in the United States here, Donald Trump won on nationalism. Is this the new wave of anti-globalism in favor of a more nationalism wave going across the globe?
I think on both sides of the Atlantic now you have leaders who are standing up for their national interest. And Brexit was all about British sovereignty, self-determination. And the exit from the EU for the United Kingdom will be a great move towards the freedom of the British people. And it's also a great development for the United States as well. And so I think that Theresa May and Donald Trump see eye to eye in terms of advancing their own national interests, but also common interests. And the special relationship has been a tremendously powerful force for freedom on the world stage. And I think the special relationship is going to be significantly strengthened, actually, over the next 4 years.
Jillian, how do these two world leaders who are very in favor of that nationalistic style, how did they push away from trade agreements like the UK and NAFTA and TPP, yet embrace NATO?
Well, I think one thing that's really important there is that in the wake of the UK imminently bowing out of the EU, whether it happens a year or 2 or 3 or 4 from now, is that in order to really keep that relationship special, as everybody's been talking about today, in order to really stay and maintain the same level of connection and commitment we've got, we really are going to need to harness every available vehicle, by which I mean NATO kind of by default is going to be more important than ever before, because it's through NATO that we're going to sort of harness our mutual defense interest, intel cooperation and coordination, as well as sort of spreading, you know, the diplomatic the democratic values that we share around the world. So it's going to be more important than ever on NATO. I think they also share this conservative, you know, politically conservative platform.
But now, can they do this? Can they push back on trade agreements, have sort of a nationalistic view on trade, yet have a globalistic view on security like NATO?
I mean, there's an obvious tension there, right? It's a great question. I don't know how they're going to rectify it, but I do know that the UK is already talking about wanting to maintain some of its special trade privileges that they have as being part of the EU. So they're not exactly turning their backs on the multilateral trade aspects of the EU either.
Julian, let me get Niall in there on that same thought. Can they be globalism on one hand for security, yet nationalism on trade?
Well, I think the British view is that NATO is a hugely important alliance. It's very, very important, for example, standing up to the Russian threat. At the same time, Britain will be seeking a series of free trade deals on the international stage once it's free from the shackles of the European Union. And at the heart of that, of course, would be a US-UK free trade agreement. Unfortunately, President Trump has expressed very strong support for a free trade deal with the United Kingdom, which is going to advance prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic.
I got to leave it right there, you guys. Julian Nile, thank you very much. Coming up, is a trade war looming with Mexico, and is that even a bad thing for America? Moments away. In the Back of the Book segment tonight, building the wall and a possible trade war with Mexico. President Trump's executive order to start construction on the border wall and trade threats to Mexico aren't sitting well with one of President Trump's most vocal critics.
Just yesterday, you said, when I saw today's gathering of the Republican Party retreat, Trump being there reminded me of Hitler addressing the Nazi Party, comparing Donald Trump to Hitler. What did you mean there?
Yes, comparing Donald Trump with Hitler and comparing the Republican Party with the Nazi Party, because they don't seem to have free mind. They don't have to decide on their own. They seem to be doing just exactly what Senor Trump proposed to them.
Joining us now with reaction, Mega TV anchor Elvira Salazar. Wow. All I can say is wow.
Yeah.
Comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Not healthy. I think it's too heated. The comparison is not healthy. I don't think it was the good idea. But, you know, at the end, Eric, I think they're going to find common ground, that President Trump and President Peña Nieto are going to talk again. You know that we're talking this morning. And everything is going to come to an end because of our border security. Everything. I see Mexico from the economic point of view, not from the political point of view.
Yeah, but isn't Mexico, aren't the Mexican citizens ticked off at the Americans right now?
Oh yeah, they are, and they're offended, and that's the rhetoric. But at the end, the White House understands that we need a safe Mexico, because Mexico has something that I don't see that we mention too often, which is the southern border with Guatemala. Mm-hmm. The majority of the people.
There's a wall there, isn't there?
Oh, there's a wall, but still, how come they come to our wall? So if Mexico tomorrow loses, the peso goes down, then they don't have the ability to control that southern border. You'll have hundreds of thousands of Guatemalans, El Salvador, Honduras, Chinese.
Walls work.
Well, sometimes
that's Disneyland if walls work. If there weren't walls in Disneyland.
We're not debating whether they work or not.
Let's talk a little bit about that heightened rhetoric of Vicente Fox there. So Pedro Enrique Peña Nieto has a very low approval rating in Mexico, right?
Correct.
So he and Trump, how is he going to find common ground with Donald Trump if Donald Trump is not popular in Mexico?
They will find, I cannot tell you right now what are they going to do, but I repeat, they were talking this morning because President Trump is bilingual. He speaks both languages. He speaks the economic language and the political language. And he will find common ground with Peña Nieto. President Trump knows that he needs to do that because of border security. That was one of the most important topics in his campaign.
Yeah, but if Peña Nieto has said we will not pay for this wall, and Vicente Fox is calling Trump Hitler, how in the world are the Mexican people going to be okay with paying for the wall? And Donald Trump has said, point blank, Mexico, everyone say it with me, who's going to pay for the wall? Mexico.
I understand, and there are tariffs. You can charge more for visas. You can charge more to cross the border, the different bridges. But at the end, what I'm saying to you is that it's going to come to a halt, and we will come on ground with Mexico, because it's the most interesting and the most important and the most intelligent thing for the White House. Trump is a very intelligent guy. He knows cultural sensitivities. He has gone to other countries to build empires. He can do the same thing with Mexico. You know why? I'm telling you, because otherwise we're going to have a refugee crisis, not an immigration problem.
I think the best argument is what you pointed out earlier in the segment. Look, there's a wall in Mexico. It just happens to be on Mexican southern border, not their northern border with the U.S.
Still, people cross it. That's why they get to our southern border. I just want for you to understand how important it is for the Mexicans to continue controlling their southern border, because the majority of the people that are coming...
Also? $270 billion that we spend on Mexican goods every single year. That's
I understand it, but we have a trade deficit with China that is $360 billion.
Right.
With Mexico is 60.
I'm going to leave it right there. Elvira, thank you very much. When we come right back, an amazing development in a story featured on The Factor last night. You don't want to miss it. Before we go tonight, we have a wonderful update to a story featured on The Factor last night about Sergeant Charles Guyton, his wife Kayla, and their newborn quadruplets. As you may have seen last night, their babies are healthy, but Kayla has been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and Fox News anchor John Scott told us about the GoFundMe webpage that's been started to help the family. Before 8 p.m. last night, the GoFundMe page had raised a little more than $18,000. Now, thanks to Factor viewers, that amount is approaching $1 million. We cannot thank your generosity enough, and Bill O'Reilly will address this more on Monday's Factor. Also, a quick reminder that Bill O'Reilly's new book, Old School, will be out on March 28th. And if you sign up as a premium member on BillO'Reilly.com, you get any one of Bill's books free of charge, along with a lot of great discounts and perks. And, of course, don't forget to check out Bill's big bestseller, Killing the Rising Sun. Also, perhaps the best episode ever of the Contributing Factor podcast, featuring a discussion about the infamous killer, Dr. Kermit Gosnell. That's hosted by Factor producer Robert Samuel. And you can find it on BillO'Reilly.com or iTunes. Thanks for watching tonight. I'm Merrick Bowling in for Bill O'Reilly. We'll be back on Monday from Los Angeles. And please remember, the spin's up right here because we're looking out for you.